Tom's 5 Minutes Bible Study. Why was a resurrection day needed? Many believers assume everyone who has ever lived is still waiting for a future resurrection. But why was a resurrection day needed in the first place? The answer begins with those who lived and died before Jesus rose from the dead. Hebrews tells us, "These all died in faith, not having received the promises." Hebrews 11:13. And again, "These all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise." Hebrews 11:39. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, David, Daniel, and countless faithful believers trusted God, yet they died waiting for something greater. What were they waiting for? They were waiting for Messiah to complete redemption and remove the barrier that separated mankind from the fullness of God's presence. This was Group 1. These were the Old Testament saints who died before the resurrection of Jesus. Hebrews says, "that they without us should not be made perfect." Hebrews 11:40. Notice that even after Christ had come, the writer of Hebrews still says they had not yet been made perfect. Why? Because God's plan was corporate. The Old Testament saints could not receive the completed promise apart from the New Covenant people. Then Jesus came. He died. He was buried. He rose again. His resurrection was unique. Unlike anyone else, Jesus had to be seen. The apostles had to witness him alive. Christianity rests upon that historical fact. He showed himself alive after his passion by many infallible proofs. Acts 1:3. His visible resurrection body was necessary because his resurrection is the foundation of the gospel. Now consider Lazarus. When Lazarus died, Martha said, "I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day." John 11:24. At that moment, Lazarus belonged to Group 1. Had Jesus not raised him, he would have remained among the Old Testament saints awaiting the resurrection day. But Jesus called Lazarus out of the tomb. Lazarus returned to physical life. He then lived beyond the resurrection of Christ. In that sense, Lazarus moved from Group 1 into Group 2. Group 2 consisted of believers living after the resurrection of Jesus, but before the consummation of the Old Covenant age. They lived during the unique transition period between AD 30 and AD 70. Hebrews describes their privilege. "Ye are come unto Mount Sion, and to the spirits of just men made perfect." Hebrews 12:22-23. These believers lived after Christ's victory. The new covenant had begun. The way into the holiest had been opened. Yet they were still waiting for the corporate completion of redemption. This explains why the apostles continued speaking of a coming fulfillment. "We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed." 1 Corinthians 15:51. "The coming of the Lord draweth nigh." James 5:8. "The end of all things is at hand." 1 Peter 4:7. The resurrection hope was still future for that generation. Why was a corporate resurrection needed? Because the problem was corporate. Adam's fall affected mankind corporately. Israel's covenant history was corporate. The Messiah came for a covenant people. Therefore, redemption would also reach its completion corporately. Daniel had prophesied, "And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake." Daniel 12, 2. Jesus repeatedly spoke of the last day, John 6:39-40. The Old Testament saints would finally receive the promise. The transition generation believers would receive the inheritance they were awaiting. Together, they would be perfected as one redeemed people. According to this understanding, once that resurrection was fulfilled and the Old Covenant age ended, the waiting ended. Group 1 received the promise. Group 2 received the inheritance. The purpose of the corporate resurrection was fulfilled. Today, there is no transition generation waiting for another covenantal resurrection. People are not automatically saved. Every person must still respond to Christ in faith. But humanity now lives in a world where redemption has been accomplished and access to God has been opened. Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life." John 11:25. His resurrection was the foundation. The corporate resurrection was the completion. The waiting ended. The promise was fulfilled. And the invitation to walk with God remains open to all. Tom's 5 minutes. One puzzle piece a day until the whole Bible comes into view.